Today's video will focus on the period between 1377 and 1380, with the dominance of the continual councils. In this video, we will approach two aspects. The first is to explain why the councils were chosen as the form of government, and the second is to discuss the makeup and aims of the free councils. So firstly, we need to look at the reasons why the councils actually ruled the country between this period. The answer is quite an obvious one. Richard was only 10 years old when he came to the throne, and therefore he was required to rule as a minor. Richard II is one of 6 kings to succeed the throne at a minority age. Richard's grandfather, Edward III, succeeded following the death of his father, Edward II. The situation for Edward's minority was very different. He was crowned at 14, and his mother and her new lover, Roger Mortimer, controlled the country up until Edward had enough control by the age of 17 to take the country back. For Henry III's rule, the country was effectively run by Henry's guardian, William Marshal. So in the past, child rulers had been aided by a guardian or a close-knit group of people associated with the royal family. The problem facing England in 1377 was who could they choose to aid Richard through this minority part of his reign. There was one obvious contender. John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster, was Edward III's eldest surviving son. But the problem was that many disliked Gaunt, mostly due to his accumulation of wealth, but the fact that he was also seen as a schemer, particularly with his sympathies to the Lollard movement, which we'll look at in a later video. The other two potential contenders were Edmund, Earl of March, and Richard, Earl of Arundel. The problem with these two is that they weren't related to the Plantagenet family through blood, and giving such a degree of power and control over these two individuals might alienate other noble families. So the solution to this problem was that Richard would rule the country. That was the pretense that was given to the country and to its subjects. The reality was that councils set up by magnates, then by Parliament, would administer the country. These councils have come to be known as the Continual Councils, and they ruled England between 1377 and 1380. Their makeup was decided upon by Parliament and by leading magnates, and each of them have a very distinct character. So the first Continual Council was from July to October in 1377. The second was between October 1377 and October 1378. And the third and final Continual Council lasted from October 1378 to 1380. What we're now going to look at is each council in turn, who they were made up of, and their aims. So firstly, we're going to look at the first council. The main aims of the first council were threefold. The first was to promote peace and reconciliation between the court and the Commons of Parliament after the squabbles that had taken place in 1376. The second aim was to give a sense of continuity and to provide stable government from Edward's reign. And the third was to show a united front that the country was working together under the new reign of Richard II. In terms of who made up this first council, well, it was made up from members from all parts of the country. So that included earls, who were high-ranking noble officials normally related to the Plantagenet line that controlled a large area of the country, barons, who are noblemen, a generic term for noblemen, prelates, who were high-ranking church officials, and bannerets and knights, who were, I suppose, a little bit like earls, but on a far smaller scale. So who was chosen? Well, in actual fact, the main thing to know about the First Continual Council is that it didn't have John of Gaunt or his two other brothers called Edmund, Earl of Cambridge, and Thomas, Earl of Buckingham. So this is quite a shock to the people and to Parliament and to the political community of the day. The two senior earls that were given control really of this first council were Edmund, Earl of March, who we've talked about before, and Richard, Earl of Arundel. The prelates were Bishop Courtenay of London and Bishop Eargham of Salisbury. The other key members were 4 men who had been involved in Edward III's court. That's William Latimer, John Knivett, Ralph Ferrers and Roger Beauchamp. And the other 4 who served with the Black Prince, Richard II's father, Lord Cobham, Richard Stafford, John Devereux and Hugh Segrave. Thus, these council members had very close ties with Richard and his family. The first council lasted only a matter of months and was replaced by a second council which was elected in October 1377. This lasted for a year. The second council aimed to push forward the country. Stability had been established with the first Continual Council, and now the tone was far more progressive. Now, this second council had far more events that took place during its rulership, and we'll look at them in later videos and in later lessons. The number of people in this council had reduced as well. So previously it had been 12 and now it was 9. 6 members retained their place for the second council: Edmund Earl of March, Bishop Courtenay, Bishop Ergham, Richard Stafford, John Devereux and Hugh Segrave. And there were 3 additions: Hugh, Earl of Stafford, Bishop Appleby of Carlisle and Sir Henry Scrope. The third and final council lasted from October 1378 to 1380, when the Commons petitioned for reform. The main aim with this council was to completely disassociate with the past, and you can see that in the reflections of who was chosen to be a member of this council. So no member of the second council retained their place in the third. There was a few people who have come back from the first council, such as Richard of Arundel, and there was some newcomers: William Earl of Suffolk, Bishop Wykeham, Bishop Harwell, Robert Hales, Aubrey de Vere, Robert Roux and Roger Beauchamp also had returned from the first council. Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure that you look at the background of each council members with your other sheet.